Hello and welcome to Gaia. In this tutorial, I'll take you through installation and the Quick Start guide for Gaia 1.9. First, create a new project and select the Unity version you want to use. Okay, so we've started a new project in Unity. To get Gaia, go to Asset Store. Now, if the Asset Store window is not showing, you can go Window, Asset Store. And then type in Gaia. And then if you don't have the latest version, make sure you update it and download it and then import it. Okay, so after you've downloaded Gaia, then you need to import it. When you're prompted to import your package, just scroll down all the way to the bottom and hit import. This process can take quite some time because there's a lot of sample content provided with Gaia. Okay, Gaia has now been imported. So let's go back to our scene. We go Window, Procedural Worlds, Gaia, Show Gaia Manager. And Gaia will detect whether you've got everything it needs in your scene. So we include post-processing version 2, some SpeedRead samples and some standard asset samples. So the next step is to install these. Gaia will pop up for the first time and prompt you to install these assets. So we suggest that you do. Now you actually may have some of these things in your project already. So if you do and you don't want to include them again, then just don't include them. That's how you exclude it. So for example, if you already have post-processing version 2 in your project, just exclude it from the import. We would recommend that you install all of these, however, as Gaia makes use of all of these assets. Okay. Gaia has installed those dependencies for you. Now the next step in the process of setting up Gaia is via the Gaia Manager. Now if you've got in our standard tab the Set Linear Deferred button showing, then if you're targeting a desktop or a console, you should select this value because this is the best way for lighting to work with most scenes. So just hit that button. Happening now is we have changed the lighting model for your game, and Unity will now re-import all of those assets but change the lighting for them from gamma to linear, which will make the lighting the colors much more accurate. And then we're using the deferred lighting model, which works better for large scenes. If you're targeting VR or mobile, then you may not want to use a deferred lighting system, and in that case you could set these things up manually yourself. Okay, now that we've installed Gaia, let's get straight to business. Let's create a randomly generated environment. To access Gaia, we go Procedural Worlds, Gaia, Show Gaia Manager. The Gaia Manager is the heart of the workflow for Gaia. This thing gives you access to all of the features that are inside of Gaia. We can choose the type of controller we want, we can choose the type of environment we want, the type of renderer we're targeting, and the size of the environment. And then what we can do is choose the different default settings, the different resource settings that we're using. Then finally we have a tabbed interface which takes us through the various workflows. In the More interface, you've also got access to our tutorials, the community and support, and in the partners and extensions you can see who our partners are and also get access to Gaia extensions, which are really cool third-party products which we've integrated to make the entire process of generating environments easier for you. So let's go back to our advanced manager and create a session manager. I'll pop Gaia out of the road. So the session manager stores all of the steps that we took to generate an environment. And the session manager also has our random terrain generator built into it. So what we'll do is we'll open this up, and inside of Gaia you have a whole bunch of stamps. There's over 150 stamps, and each of these stamps show different types of features. And what the session manager is going to do is, based on the chance of each different type of feature being selected, it will dynamically generate an environment from these stamps. So we'll just use all the defaults and we'll go add stamps. While it's doing that, also worthy of noting that there are different types of environments it'll generate. So if we've got a border style of water, it'll create an island. If we've got a border style of mountains, it'll be a mountainous area with things in the middle, and then it can just randomly spread things around. So it's actually created something for us. Let's see what it's done. So what you can see happening here is the session manager is now playing back the session of the different stamps that it's created. So let's go and have a look at what it's done here. With a mountain there, some fairly low-lying areas, lots of fairly flat stuff as well, so that's looking pretty good. I'll add a manual stamp over here so we can get a bit more interest into our terrain. Now the stamper has been left in the state that it was last used by the session manager, so what I'll do is I'll delete that. I'll bring Gaia back, and I'm going to create my stamp. I'm going to create my terrain under advance and go show stamper. This will bring us back a nice fresh stamper, and let's look at our hills here and we'll find something that's fairly flat. This looks sort of interesting. Actually, I quite like mesas. Let's go have a look in the mesas directory. Here are some different mesas. This one looks pretty cool, so let's have a look at that. Now you notice that when we've done that, Gaia is showing you a preview mesh of our stamp, and this is way too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, uncheck ground base. I'm going to make this thing a bit smaller. Now I'm going to move it over here, bring it down a bit. Now see this blue plane? That is sea level. What Gaia is doing is it has an understanding of where the water is in your terrain, and it actually changes things accordingly. So what I'm going to do is move this over here. Let's maybe rotate it a bit. This is one of the powerful features of the stamping system. You can really get a lot of control over where and how it's going to place things. The other thing I want to do is, rather than creating these harsh borders, I'm going to use a distance mask. And I'm just going to quickly show you that again. From 1 to 0. So a nice blend from 1 to 0. I might actually just push that up a bit so we get more of the detail of our mask. And if I just turn off that stamp preview and hit stamp, there we go, we've added that extra little bit of feature into our environment. So we've got basically the best of both worlds happening here. We've got some random terrain generation, and we've also got some manual terrain generation going on. Now I want a bit more land in my island here. Well, that is pretty cool already. So I'll just turn my preview on again, maybe move it over here, and this time we'll rotate it. Oops. And maybe drop it down a bit. Actually, maybe we'll flatten it a bit. And now drop it down again. Make sure we're above the water level there. So let's see what happens now. We'll zoom into this a bit. Turn off our preview and hit stamp. You don't need to do that, but I just like to do that because I can see it working. Cool, so now we've got an interesting sort of mesa environment here. Looking pretty cool. I'll show you one other cool feature of Gaia while we're here. And you don't need to do this, I'm just showing it to you purely because it's pretty cool. So what I've got here is a thing called, under the standard tab, I've got enhanced terrain. So I'll bring that up, and what this is a whole bunch of very, very cool tools which allow you to do interesting, almost image processing like work to your terrain. So we can do things like add more contrast to it, we can make these features bigger, We can denoise it, we can run hydraulic erosion on it, we can multiply it so we can make our high bits higher and our low bits a bit lower, and we can also quantize it, set it to a height, add a bit of height to it. So just to show you this, for example, let's just add 20 meters. Boom. And we just added 20 meters to our terrain. This is pretty cool, gives us a bit more land to work with. And then let's go back to our quantized curves and watch this, because I rather love this feature. So I'm going to perform this operation. And what actually Gaia's done is it's created even more terracing, and it's also created some nice beach areas for us and plenty of flat land to use to build cool forts and things. If I didn't like that, I could just go back and then I could step forward again just to compare it. I think I'll leave it as it was. You don't need to keep those settings. Alright, the next part of our process is to procedurally texture and populate and then press play. So we've got our nice environment now. So we go back to Gaia and we go to the next step in the process, which is create spawners. What Gaia has done is created all the different spawners that it requires to do the work. And spawning is the process of applying resources to your environment. So let's hit texture spawn. So what a spawner has is access to the resources that we use to describe the terrain, and then it's running a bunch of tools and a bunch of spawning algorithms to then apply those resources into the terrain. So what Gaia has just done for us is textured the terrain. Now this is a 2 kilometer terrain, so it's a lot of work that it's just done. So the next thing we want to do is spawn our game objects. So if you chose the 3D Forge assets, then we're going to spawn in a bunch of cool rocks and villages and farms. If you chose the Cinti assets, then we'll do the same thing, but they're done in a low poly style. And what you can see is that Gaia is iterating across the terrain, and it's actually sampling the terrain and looking for flat areas where it can spawn these assets. Because they're farms and villages and so on, it doesn't make sense to spawn them on the side of a mountain, so that's why it's actually taking a bit of time, because it's working through all this terrain. The other interesting thing that's going on here is that this is not just one asset that's being spawned in, but we're spawning in buildings and trees and rocks and fences, and we're doing things like we're conforming them to the terrain so that the fence slopes with the terrain and so on. So as soon as this is finished, we'll actually go and take a look. You can see it's doing a lot of work here. It's spawned a total so far of 43 instances of villages, rocks and so on, and farms. Okay, so let's go and have a look at what it's done. Underneath our spawner, it's actually created 47 different things. So let's go and have a look at that. So let's go and look at a farm, for example. We'll just click on the first object. And here we go, we've got a farm. So what's cool about this is it's chosen a relatively flat area. It's conformed everything nicely to the terrain. It's actually even retextured underneath that object so that you've got a texture that makes more sense. And it's done this all the way across the environment. Here's another one, another little farm, rather cool. These are really awesome assets from 3D Forge. Some great rocks from Motoproprio. These textures are from GameTextures.com, and the trees are speed trees. So now we've got the game objects, interesting little things to discover in our terrain. Let's go to the next step. Now I'm taking a little bit more time here because I'm explaining things as I'm going. So the next spawner is our tree spawner. So we'll go spawn. And Gaia has just used its clustered organic algorithm to spawn trees. Let's add some more. I tend to like lots of trees in my environments. And then the next tree. So the interesting thing about these spawners also is if you want more of something, just spawn it again. So now we'll do some coverage tree spawners. So you can see the tree spawner running across the terrain there. We'll just do it one more time. So it's just filling in the gaps. Then the last spawner is the detail spawner. So this is our grass. So what's happening here is we're iterating across the entire terrain at 2 meter increments, which are randomly jittered, and running each of these grass rules to place wide grass, narrow grass, ferns, flowers. These are awesome assets from TurboSculptor, and they're provided free to use with your game. Gaia is actually looking for things like buildings and so on, and making sure there's no collisions, so you won't have grass growing up through your building. So we're basically done. Now we're finally ready to see this thing in action. So let's do the last magic step. And this is pretty epic. This is something new that's in Gaia 1.9. We've really gone to town with how we dress up your environment. So we'll hit our last magic button. Boom. Okay, so what's going on here? We have now added post effects. I'll just pop this out of the road for the moment. We've added post effects, we've added water, we've added skies, we've done reflection probes. In fact, we've set up all these different things for you. So we've got our post processing. With Gaia 1.9, we've added this new ambient audio, which changes the audio based on time of day. We've set up reflection probes and all the lighting stuff that's required. We've set up our underwater effects and our water. We've added wind zones, and we've also added our screenshotting system. Okay, so now let's run the environment we've just created. Not too shabby. So we've got a nice environment here, some nice post effects. It's pretty cool. Notice we've got some birds tweeting in the background here. Just going to zip through here. Really interesting terrain features. And as I zoom through here, I'm going very, very fast, because it's quite a big environment. Oh, look, here we've got a little farm. Very cool little farm here. And let's go and check out our water. So this is our new water and sky system. It looks rather nice. Let's go and have a look underwater. Rather cool. And let's have a look around our little environment here. Got some really interesting terrain features there. We can improve the way the terrain is rendered with additional tools like CTS, but still a pretty nice start there. And then let's also change the time of day. Now we can do this at runtime, but you should do it typically at design time. So I'm going to go into our ambient sky samples. Let's change our sky. At the moment we've got our daytime, and I'm going to change it to morning. Notice how the sound has changed and the light has changed, and even the skybox. And then I'm going to go to evening. And I really quite like this. Love the way the light changes things. And we can go to nighttime. Okay, and back to day. Okay, so I've shown you a combination of procedural and manual generation. Now I'll just show you the standard manual generation workflow. So I'll go Window, Procedural Worlds, Gaia. And this time I'll use the resources from Nature Manufacture. I'll still use the 3D Forge exteriors, and we'll use our standard old settings. This time, instead of a flying camera, I'm going to use a first person camera. And what I'll do is I'll go Create Train and Show Stamper. What Gaia has done is it's taken these settings and used them to set up our terrain for us. So let's do the first part of the process, which is stamping our terrain. So let's look at our valleys. Got some nice valleys here. Quite like Chumash. So let's drag that onto our stamper. What Gaia's done is create a preview mesh. You can see where water is. Got some mountains over there. So let's uncheck ground base because that allows us to move the stamp and lift it up. Got a bit of water there and go stamp. Cool, so we've got our basic environment. And then what I'm going to do is actually modify this environment a bit more. Might look at our rivers, and there's quite an interesting Colorado Valley here. Let's try this one, Colorado River. So this is taken from a satellite scan, and as it is, it's no good for us because it's fitted to the terrain and it's too big. So we're going to modify it, and we're going to put it down in the lower part of our environment here. In fact, I'm going to choose a different stamp altogether. I'm going to grab this one. So here we've got the confluence of 3 areas all meeting. So we're going to drop it below the terrain, and I'm going to maybe make it a bit smaller and rotate it a bit. And then most importantly, I want to blend this stamp in to the edges so that we don't get any sudden cuts into our terrain. So let me just go over here. And I'm going to use a distance mask. Just show you what this looks like. So what this is at the center of the terrain, the stamp will be applied at its full strength, and at the edge, it'll peter out to nothing. So what you'll be able to do is basically have a nice blend from the stamp in the center to the stamp at the borders. And let's just look at what we can do with this. Might drop it down a bit more. Now by default, Gaia will raise the height of the terrain, but we don't want to do that. We want to create a valley. So we're going to lower the height of the terrain. Other things we could do is blending, stenciling, and so on. Let's just go lower and then hit the stamp button, turn off our preview so you can see it. And there you can see that we've just added in this new area to our environment. So if we hit the undo button, so that was before and after. Now I might actually just turn that preview on and even stamp it again and drop it down a bit more so we get a bit more of an effect here. Turn off the preview and stamp so we can see it. Now we've got quite a interesting little environment there. Now if I look at this, I see that we've got quite a lot of water there. I want to raise my terrain up so that this valley is more accentuated. So I'm going to go into my enhanced terrain, and we're going to choose add to terrain, and I might add 10 meters to it, or even 5 meters, and see how we go with that. Let's add a bit more, another 5 meters. There we go. So we've got some lowlands, and then we've got our little interesting area there. Maybe do it one more time. So we've got this interesting water feature in the middle of our environment here. I think that's rather cool. And we could add more features. And if you look at our other tutorials, I'll go into this in a lot more detail. This is good enough for now. So I'll go back to Gaia and we'll do step 2, which is create our spawners. And we'll just run our texture, coverage texture spawner. So now what we're doing was painting in our textures. Okay, so we've textured our terrain, looking rather nice. You can see the sandy and the rocky areas here, the new feature. I won't do the game object spawner this time because I showed you that in the previous section. So let's just add some trees, add a few more, and why not a few more. Give you a sense of the work here. We just added 6,473 trees, quite a few. Then we'll just fill in the gaps. This just helps to accentuate and get rid of big bland blank spots. Then we'll add some grass. Now you don't need to use our sample assets. There are plenty of tutorials which will show you how to substitute your own assets and to create your own look. We've just provided these to give you a good starting point and to show you how to set Gaia up. To give you a sense of the work being done here, you can also see that there is a lot of grass being placed into our scene. So we're actually iterating over the entire terrain, looking for areas where we can put grass. Okay, so we've got our grass done. So let's do the final part of the process, or the almost final. We don't need to bake lighting. That's something you do before you finish with your scene. But let's go create player and so on. Okay, Gaia's added all that stuff in for us, and it's plonked us right on the edge of this cliff here. We don't want to be in the cliff, because you want to grab our first person controller, move them back from the precipice there, drop it down, there we go. And when we start, we'll be looking out over our environment. And then, just for the heck of it, let's go and look at our water here, and we'll change our water to clear blue, cyan, deep blue, make it deep blue. And let's change our sky to say nighttime, no, evening. As you can see, Gaia is just adjusting as we go. Maybe morning. Yeah, maybe works better for this. And let's see what we ended up with. So we've got our morning, got our morning sounds. Quite a cool little environment here. It's actually quite a large environment. Lots of trees. There's our cool water feature we added. Let's go for a little jump. Our water system. Okay, thanks for watching the introduction so far. To finish off, I'll just show you where the tutorials, the documentation, help and chat are. So to access our Quickstart guide, go to our documentation directory and double click on it. And the Quickstart guide really just takes what I've just talked to you about in this video, that does it step by step, talks about how to set up your project, which is a one-off thing, then how to do random and manual terrain generation. And then when you're ready to get a bit deeper with Gaia, the documentation is quite a detailed document. We've gone to a lot of effort to explain how Gaia works and how you can customize it. You can basically change every asset, every texture, and get a hugely varied range of things that you can do with Gaia. And then if we go to our menu here, if you'd like to come and talk to us or the community, come into Discord. If you're interested in our other assets, click on here. Something you might be interested in if you're doing large environments is Sector. We recently acquired this. We've modified it to work with Gaia, but we haven't released that modification yet because we're still testing. But Sector's quite cool because you can break up and stream your scenes, and this allows you to have really large environments. It can have a dramatic improvement in frame rate because you're doing less work on the scene at one time, because there's less in memory at one time. So we have a complete project, which is the entire thing. We have a streaming system where you can buy just the streaming part of it. We have a culling solution. You can use just culling if you want. We have an audio streaming solution, and then we have our core system, which is free. And with the core system, you can actually cut up your terrains and make them into smaller chunks, which again, if you put a culling system on top of it, can dramatically improve your frame rates. So the next thing, just very quickly, so we talked about Discord, where you can talk to the community and often get answers faster than we can add them. We've talked about our other assets. Our tutorials is another very useful place to go. So this is our website, and we've got video tutorials of most of the aspects of working with Gaia. And we also have other tutorials in there as well, which talk about how to get better lighting and how to optimize your scene to get better frame rates. So that's well worth a look at. And finally, last thing is if you have a problem and you still stuck and the documentation hasn't helped and the tutorials and Discord haven't helped, then please lodge a ticket. We have a ticketed system, and this is the one place that we guarantee that if you leave us a message, then we'll get back to you. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.